It was 2:17 a.m., December 15, 1975. A young Denzel Washington knelt alone in the empty chapel at Fordham University, tears streaming down his face. In 6 hours, he had to make a decision that would change the world forever: become a minister like his father wanted, or pursue his impossible dream of acting. What happened in that chapel that night didn't just save his soul, it gave birth to one of the greatest actors who ever lived. But the choice that awaited him at sunrise would have shocked anyone who knew the wild, rebellious kid he had been just 12 months earlier. We've all faced that moment, standing at the crossroads between what our family expects and what our heart desperately wants. The weight of disappointing people who love us, the fear of choosing the wrong path, the crushing responsibility of a decision that will define everything. For 20-year-old Denzel Washington, that moment came during the darkest night of his young life. This isn't just a story about choosing a career. This is about a young man who had lost his way, found his faith, and then had to choose between serving God and serving his art. And what happened that night would echo through every single performance he ever gave. But to understand why Denzel was crying in that chapel, we have to go back 18 months earlier, to the phone call that shattered his world. The phone call that changed everything came at 3:45 a.m., August 1974. Denzel's phone rang in his dorm room. On the other end was his mother's voice, broken and barely audible. "Your father had a heart attack, baby. He's gone." Denzel Hayes Washington Sr., the man who had dedicated his life to serving God and his community, was dead at 50. The last conversation they'd had was an argument about Denzel's grades and wasted potential. Denzel dropped out of Fordham immediately. For the next 6 months, he drifted through New York City like a ghost, drinking, fighting, and slowly destroying everything his father had tried to teach him. His mother Lennis watched helplessly as her son spiraled into darkness, but she didn't know about the guilt eating him alive. The guilt had a name, and it was haunting every single night. 3 weeks before his father's death, Reverend Washington had invited Denzel to preach at Mount Airy Baptist Church. "Son, you have a gift with words," he had said. "Why don't you use it for God's glory instead of entertaining people?" Denzel had laughed and said, "Acting is my calling, not preaching, Dad. You'll understand someday." Someday never came. Now, sitting in bars until 4 a.m., Denzel would replay that conversation over and over. Had he broken his father's heart? Was his selfish dream of acting worth more than his father's dying wish? The questions tortured him until, one night in February 1975, he found himself standing outside Mount Vernon's new Mount Olive Baptist Church at midnight. The door was locked, but somehow he needed to get inside. What happened next defied every logical explanation. Denzel tried every door, every window. The church was sealed tight. Just as he was about to leave, defeated, an elderly custodian appeared from nowhere. "You look like you need to be in there more than I need to lock up," the man said, opening the front door. "Take your time, son." To this day, Denzel swears that custodian was an angel. Inside the empty sanctuary, surrounded by the same pews where his father had preached for 15 years, Denzel finally broke down. He fell to his knees and, for the first time since the funeral, truly prayed. "God, I don't know what you want from me. Dad wanted me to serve you, but I feel called to act. How do I honor both?" What happened next would change the trajectory of his entire life. The voice he heard wasn't his father's, it was something much more powerful. As Denzel prayed, the chapel filled with an inexplicable warmth. In his mind, clear as daylight, came words that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Who said you couldn't do both? Every role you play, every story you tell, every heart you touch, that is ministry. Your stage is the world." Denzel opened his eyes, and for a split second, he swore he could see his father standing at the pulpit, smiling and nodding. The vision lasted only a moment, but the message was crystal clear. He didn't have to choose between his faith and his art. He could serve God through his gift. But the real test came 6 months later, when everything he thought he understood would be challenged once more. The letter arrived on December 14, 1975, and it changed everything again. Denzel had returned to Fordham, throwing himself into theater with renewed purpose. His grades improved, his performances were powerful, and he felt like he was honoring both his father and his calling. Then came the letter that would force him to choose definitively. The board of directors at Mount Airy Baptist Church was formally inviting him to become their new associate pastor. "Your father spoke often about your gift for ministry," the letter read. "We believe God is calling you to continue His work." The position came with full seminary funding, a guaranteed future, and the respect of his community. That same week, his drama professor handed him an application for the American Conservatory Theater's advanced program in California. "You have something special, Denzel. Don't waste it on anything less than greatness. 2 paths, 2 callings, 1 night to decide." That quote as how he ended up in the Fordham Chapel at 2:17 a.m., wrestling with the biggest decision of his life. What his father's ghost told him that night would shock you. As Denzel knelt in prayer, struggling with his choice, he felt that familiar presence again. This time the voice was unmistakably his father's. "Son, I never wanted you to be me. I wanted you to be the best version of yourself. If God gave you the gift of acting, then honor Him by being the greatest actor you can be." The words hit him like lightning. His father had never wanted him to abandon his dreams. He had wanted him to pursue them with purpose and integrity. Acting wasn't a rejection of his faith. It could be the ultimate expression of it. But just as everything became clear, someone entered the chapel who would test his resolve one final time. The person who walked into that chapel at 3:30 a.m. was the last person he expected to see. James Forbes, the dean of Union Theological Seminary, stood in the doorway. He had driven down from Manhattan specifically to find Denzel. "Your mother called me," he said. "She's worried about you, son, and she told me about the choice you're facing." Dr. Forbes sat beside Denzel in the pew. "I knew your father well. He was a great preacher, but you know what made him truly great? He never tried to force anyone into a mold that didn't fit them. He believed God shapes each of us for a unique purpose." Then Dr. Forbes said something that would echo through every role Denzel ever played. "Some men preach from pulpits, son. Others preach from stages. The message matters more than the medium." As the sun rose over Fordham, Denzel made his choice, but it wasn't what anyone expected. At 6:45 a.m., as dawn light flooded through the chapel windows, Denzel stood up. His decision was made, but it was more complex than simply choosing acting over ministry. He would pursue acting with the same dedication, integrity, and service to others that his father had brought to the pulpit. He walked to the church office and wrote 2 letters. One to Mount Airy Baptist Church, politely declining their offer, but promising to honor his father's memory in his own way. The other to the American Conservatory Theater, accepting their program but requesting permission to volunteer at local community centers, using theater to inspire and educate underserved youth. But the most important letter was the one he wrote to his father. "Dear Dad," he wrote, "I finally understand what you were trying to tell me. You weren't asking me to abandon my dreams. You were asking me to make them worthy of the God who gave them to me. I promise to use this gift to tell stories that matter, to inspire people who need hope, and to honor the values you taught me. I'm still going to be in the ministry, Dad. My congregation will just be a little bigger than yours." What happened next proved that his father was right all along. Denzel kept that letter in his wallet for the next 40 years. Every time he chose a role, he would ask himself, would this make Dad proud? Does this story serve a greater purpose? That's how he ended up playing Malcolm X, Reuben Carter, Frank Lucas, Troy Maxon, and dozens of characters who challenged audiences to think, feel, and grow. Years later, when he won his first Oscar, Denzel thanked God before anyone else. "My father always told me that whatever gift God gives you, you have to give it back to the world," he said. "I hope I'm making him proud." That night in 1975, when a 20-year-old boy wrestled with his destiny in an empty chapel, wasn't just about choosing a career. It was about understanding that faith and art aren't opponents. They're partners in the greatest ministry of all, touching human hearts with truth. The young man who almost became a preacher did become one. After all, he just used a stage instead of a pulpit, and every single performance became a sermon about human dignity, resilience, and the power of truth. That's the night Denzel Washington didn't just choose acting. He chose to make acting holy. And if you think that's the end of the story, you haven't heard what his father whispered to him at the Academy Awards ceremony in 2002. But that December night in 1975 was just the beginning. The real test of Denzel's faith-driven approach to acting would come in ways no one could have predicted. 3 weeks after making his choice, something happened that made him question everything again. January 1976, Denzel was in his first advanced acting class at Fordham, when Professor Williams handed out scripts for their semester project. The play was The Dutchman by Amiri Baraka, a brutal racially charged drama that would require Denzel to use language and embody attitudes that went against everything his father had taught him. "I can't do this," Denzel told Professor Williams after class. "The profanity, the anger, the message, my father would roll over in his grave." Professor Williams, a seasoned black actor who had fought his own battles in the theater world, sat down with Denzel. "Son, let me tell you something about art and faith that your daddy probably didn't have time to explain before he passed. What Professor Williams said next would revolutionize how Denzel understood his calling. "Your father fought racism from the pulpit with sermons," Williams said. "But some battles need to be fought on stage with truth. When you play a character struggling with hate, you're not becoming that hate. You're helping the audience understand it, confront it, and hopefully overcome it." Williams pulled out a worn Bible from his desk drawer. "Your father knew this verse by heart, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Sometimes, son, the truth is ugly. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. But if you shy away from uncomfortable truths, you're not serving God, you're serving your own comfort. That night, Denzel called his mother. "Mama, did Daddy ever talk about acting, about whether it could be holy?" Lennis Washington was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that would change everything. "Baby, your daddy had a secret. He used to practice his sermons by acting out Bible stories in front of the mirror. He'd be Moses 1 minute, Jesus the next, then Paul. He said the only way to preach truth was to embody it completely. What his mother revealed next about his father's past would blow his mind. "Denzel, there's something I never told you," his mother continued. "Before your daddy became a preacher, he wanted to be an actor. He was good too, real good. He performed in church plays, community theater, even auditioned for some professional companies in New York." Denzel's hands shook as he held the phone. "What? Why did he stop?" "It was 1950, baby. There weren't many opportunities for black actors who wanted to maintain their dignity. The roles available, they were demeaning, stereotypical. Your daddy made a choice. He'd rather serve God with integrity than compromise his values for Hollywood." The weight of this revelation hit Denzel like a physical blow. "But you know what he told me on our wedding day," his mother continued. "He said, someday, when the world is ready, our children won't have to make that choice. They'll be able to act with dignity, tell important stories, and serve God at the same time. He was talking about you, baby. He was always talking about you." Denzel hung up the phone and walked back to that same chapel where he'd made his decision weeks earlier. Now everything made sense. His father hadn't been asking him to abandon acting. He'd been preparing him to succeed where he himself couldn't. The performance that proved his father right happened 3 months later, and it changed everything. March 1976, opening night of The Dutchman. Denzel stood backstage, his father's Bible in one hand, his costume in the other.
He had found a way to honor both. He would perform the role with complete truth and commitment, but he would also use it as an opportunity to educate and inspire. Before the curtain rose, he whispered a prayer. "Dad, help me show them that even in darkness light can shine through." What happened that night transcended performance. Denzel didn't just play Clay, the young black man confronting racism and violence. He embodied every young black man who had ever faced those same struggles. The audience sat in stunned silence, then erupted in applause that lasted 7 minutes. But it was what happened after the show that really proved his father's influence. A young black student approached Denzel in tears. "Man, I was about to drop out of college," he said. "I thought there was no point fighting the system. But watching you up there, seeing how you turned anger into strength, pain into power, you made me remember who I am and what I'm capable of." That's when Denzel understood his father's ministry lived on through his performances. Over the next 2 years, something extraordinary began happening to everyone who watched Denzel act. Word spread quickly through the theater community about the young actor who brought something different to every role. A depth, a spirituality, a sense of purpose that elevated not just his performance, but everyone around him. Director Lloyd Richards, who would later become a mentor, saw Denzel in a student production and said something that would define his entire approach to casting. "This young man doesn't just act, he ministers. He heals something in people when they watch him." But Denzel's real test would come in 1977, when he was offered his first professional role, and it was everything his father would have hated. The role was in a blaxploitation film called Wilma, and saying yes could launch his career, or destroy his soul. The call came on his 23rd birthday, and it forced him to choose between his principles and his dreams. The casting director's words were still ringing in his ears. "We want you for the lead in Wilma. It's about a pimp who becomes a drug dealer. Lots of violence, sex, street language. It's what's selling right now, kid. This could make you a star." Denzel held the script, knowing that accepting this role would pay his rent for 6 months and open doors in Hollywood. But every page he read felt like a betrayal of everything his father stood for. That night, he went to Mount Airy Baptist Church, the same church that had offered him the pastor position. Sitting in his father's favorite pew, Denzel opened his father's Bible to a passage that was underlined and starred. "What shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" As he sat there, the elderly church custodian, the same man who had let him into the building years before, approached. "You're Reverend Washington's boy," the old man said. "I can see him in you." Got that same troubled look he used to get when he was wrestling with a tough decision. What did he do when he was confused? Denzel asked. The custodian smiled. He'd ask himself one question: will this help people? Your daddy never took any action that he thought would hurt people, even if it would help him. What Denzel did next would set the pattern for every career choice he ever made. The next morning, Denzel called his agent back. "I'm not taking the role," he said. "Are you crazy?" his agent shouted. "Do you know how many actors would kill for this opportunity?" "That's exactly why I can't take it," Denzel replied. "My father didn't raise me to play characters that would poison people's minds. I'll find another way." His agent hung up on him. For the next 8 months, Denzel waited tables and auditioned for better roles that never materialized. Friends thought he was insane. His bank account thought he was suicidal. But then came the phone call that would vindicate everything he believed in. The call that changed his life came from the most unexpected source. "Is this Denzel Washington?" The voice belonged to Wilfred Leach, director of the New York Shakespeare Festival. "I heard you turned down Wilma because it didn't align with your values. I respect that. I have a role that might interest you. Othello in our upcoming production, Shakespeare, classical theater. A role that would challenge him artistically while honoring his principles. There's one catch," Leach continued. "The pay is terrible, barely enough to cover subway fare. but you'll be working with the best actors in New York, and critics actually review our productions." Denzel didn't hesitate. "When do we start?" The reviews of his Othello were extraordinary, but more importantly, something magical happened to the audiences. Night after night, people would approach Denzel after the show with tears in their eyes. A Vietnam veteran told him, "Your Othello helped me understand my own rage and how to channel it into something productive." A young woman said, "Watching you tonight made me believe I could overcome my own jealousy and insecurity." This was it. This was the ministry his father had envisioned, using the power of performance to heal hearts, open minds, and inspire souls. But the most important audience member was someone he never expected to see. Closing night of Othello, Denzel was removing his makeup when there was a knock on his dressing room door. Standing there was Dr. James Forbes from Union Seminary, the man who had counseled him in the chapel years earlier. "I came to see what you've done with the choice you made, Doctor," Forbes said. "Son, what I witnessed tonight was a sermon more powerful than anything I've heard from most pulpits. You found your calling." Dr. Forbes handed him a letter. "This is from your mother. She asked me to give it to you after I saw your performance." With trembling hands, Denzel opened the envelope. "My precious son, your daddy came to me in a dream last week," he said. "Tell Denzel I'm proud. He found the way to preach without a pulpit. Every performance is a prayer. Every character is a congregation member he's helping to heal. You honor God and your Father with every role you choose. Keep choosing with your heart and your faith. Love, Mama. 20-5 years later, something happened that proved his father's spirit was still guiding him. Academy Awards night. Denzel had just won the Oscar for Training Day, a role that required him to play a corrupt cop, another morally ambiguous character that tested his principles. But he had found a way to show the consequences of corruption, to make the audience understand why good people sometimes make bad choices. As he stood at the podium, holding his Oscar, Denzel looked up toward heaven and whispered words only he could hear. "This one's for you, Dad. I hope I made you proud." Later that night, at the after party, a young black actor approached him. "Mr. Washington, I just want to thank you. Watching your acceptance speech tonight, seeing how you honored God and your Father, you showed me that I don't have to choose between my faith and my career. I can be both a believer and an actor." In that moment, Denzel saw himself at 20 years old, wrestling with the same impossible choice in a chapel at Fordham. The circle was complete. His father's ministry lived on, not through sermons but through stories, not from a pulpit, but from a stage. The boy who almost became a preacher had become something even more powerful, a minister to the world, touching millions of hearts with every performance, proving that art and faith aren't enemies, but partners in the greatest ministry of all, revealing the truth about what it means to be human. That night, in 1975, when Denzel Washington knelt in an empty chapel and chose his destiny, he didn't just save his career. He created a blueprint for how artists can serve God by serving humanity. Every role he's played since has been both a performance and a prayer. Every character a lesson in the power of truth, dignity, and faith. And somewhere in heaven, Reverend Denzel Hayes Washington Sr. is still applauding.